spaces. This gives you just a flavor of the relationship and how it fits together. So you have the primary and secondary chambers, which is where the combustion process occurs. The gas itself with heat then goes through and it's recovered, as General Berry talked about. So therefore that's where we can generate the electricity in the heat recovery boiler. The quench system is where water is introduced into the system so that we can lower the temperature to be able to protect that fabric filter. The last thing you want is for really hot gas to be going through that fabric filter and potentially have an issue there. So we're going to drop that down through the quench system. Right before that we have that injection of those controls of the acid gas. And the bottom two units that you see down there, the emergency generators. One of the main concerns here is that we know that there are thunderstorms, we know that there are power outages, we want to make sure that there's not going to be bypass events or emissions that would be associated with those. By having the emergency generator, if we lose power, that unit is able to operate the incinerator and the air pollution control device. So we do not lose the process if we lose power because we have the backup. One of the other distinctions, and I know some folks were talking about it, is what happens to this material? You know, the material comes in as waste. What actually happens to it? What's the breakdown? How do we see where it all goes? And if we use just one pound, or the number one kind of as a unity, if 1 pound of waste comes in, there is between 1% and 5% of that would end up as ash. So ash would be the inert material, the metals, anything that cannot be burned. So that would come out in the fly ash, in the bottom ash that you would see right at the bottom of the primary chamber. So that's 1 to 5% of that. The remaining material is therefore then combusted and goes through and is turned into a gaseous phase in the primary chamber. In the secondary chamber is where it is further reduced. And from that point on, that goes through the air pollution control train, such that at the end of the day of what comes out the stack, 99.9% of that is nitrogen, O2, CO2, and water vapor. The 0.1% of that is what is regulated in those other pollutants that we talked about and that are in the EC rules.
What rules are the EC rules, if I may ask?
Yeah, I think we're ready for questions.
Okay. Let me take your questions. I'll start on this side, and then I'll take one on this side, ma'am.
I want to know, where does the water go?
Okay.
How do you filter it?
Could you hear her question? No. Where does the water go?
That you use to cool the gases.
That
I don't want it in my drinking supply.
I
I'll get right
understand.
next to it.
Great question. The question was, where does the water go that you use to cool the gases? The thing about it is because of the temperature of the gas as it comes in play, it gets vaporized. So the water, there's no discharge water that goes with that. It actually gets vaporized and is part of the exhaust stream that gets exhausted.
I'd like to point out that tonight is not a hearing, and you're not sworn to tell the truth. What guarantees does the public have that we're hearing the whole story tonight? Is there any guarantee?
I'd like to answer that.
Okay.
Ms. Long, we are very sincere about getting the truth out. We are. For one thing, I have to tell you, I listened to your radio interview that talked about that this might be a dump. And I'm saying that, okay, I'll go here.
Take your stuff out of Jacksonville.
I'm saying that we are here tonight to make sure that we have the truth. Ms. Long was saying, how could you be assured that we were not telling the truth? And I want to make sure that you know that we are very sincere in terms of making sure that you do not have misinformation. And I appreciate your question. Yes, ma'am.
Keeping in mind that the Calster sawmill is actually listed as a major source, and this community fully supported that. What do you have in place to test, identify, and verify radioactive materials, and then what is your procedure for handling those materials?
Did you
Radiation does not
understand the
burn.
question?
The question was, what type of materials do we have in place, or what policy systems testing to consider radioactive materials? Radioactive materials do not qualify as medical waste and therefore cannot be incinerated.
Right, but you said that your radioactive materials come in on boxed, concealed, closed containers, and they are not open until they're inside the facility. So what process do you have to ensure, to test, to make sure that those materials, once they're here, are not radioactive? Because I'm aware that
David.
you're not allowed to process radioactive materials.
David, could you answer the process?
That's a tough question.
Okay.
And the
Can you
que-
come up to the microphone? This is Mr. Hendrickson that owns the transporter company.
That's a good question, ma'am. And the way I'll answer that is, the places where we would normally see radioactivity is in a hospital. And the hospitals have regulations that are in place that you can't get it out of the hospital, no matter what. We don't pick it up, but I think you're asking me, if I can just elaborate on this, you're asking what guarantees me that what I pick up isn't radioactive? We don't have radioactivity equipment to test it on our trucks or in our facility. So it's not part of our regulation that we have to follow.
Are you willing to consider that for your safety of your staff, the safety of this community?
I understand your concern, but you have to understand that that industry is heavily regulated, very heavily regulated. And I don't want you to think that I'm not pushing this aside, because we are concerned about that too. But the hospital has places where when you walk through, you can't get through the door. So any radioactivity that tries to get through the door can't get through the door.
I can tell you from firsthand experience,
Please do.
radioactive material does get around, and a simple testing system, simple monitors could immediately detect certain amounts of radiation. And a company who wanted to protect the community, wanted to protect their staff, could very easily put in place some very simple radioactive monitors.
Listen,
Take that under consideration.
we absolutely will. There's no doubt in my mind that as we talk to the other generators of waste and we talk to the other facilities that are doing this very same thing, that we will learn from their experiences. And if their experiences indicates that those type of monitoring equipment's need, we will absolutely have those in the facility. But I'm not going to go and chase things down that aren't a problem. If it's been identified to us as a problem through the other generators, through the other facilities, we will take the appropriate action and work with the state of Florida to find out where the problem really is in the generation of those kinds of things and the transportation.
I think
But certainly we won't ignore that kind of an issue.
We wouldn't want to ignore it, and I think if you know of healthcare facilities that are putting things in red bags that aren't right, you know, maybe we should talk after the meeting, and because that's an issue that might should be followed up on. Yes, sir.
May I expand on that a little bit? As a transporter, we identify the facility. And so we know what is in that facility to begin with, you know, where we pick up. So when you're asking me about radioactivity, we know that there's not going to be some in that facility. We know where the radioactivity is, and so therefore we're not prone to just walk out of the door with something that could possibly be radioactive. So most of the facilities that we do pick up, we identify, like a dentist's office, a doctor's office. You don't see normally radioactivity within a normal doctor's office.
Actually, you do see some of it. And we have a lot
And under what conditions, ma'am?
and we have a lot of oncology centers.
Like I said, we identify the facility. We do identify the facility.
Yes, sir.
Medical waste is a very broad topic. What exactly